Guess which team is ranked when Colorado travels to the Coliseum to take on the USC Trojans? We bring in Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles to break down the matchup between the Trojans and those surprising Buffs, Nick. 4-1.
Yeah.
The one loss was to Michigan. And even though the final was 45-28, the Buffs were hanging right in there at like 24-21. They had a lead throughout most of the game through the first half to three quarters. Sefo Liufau, their starting quarterback, knocked out of the game, and then Michigan took over and won the game. But the Buffs have been mighty impressive.
Yeah, this is a team that I think has surprised a lot of people across the country, but for those that had the opportunity to play Colorado last season, you really saw a lot of signs. Even Clay Helton has mentioned this week after they played them last year, like this is going to be a good team as soon as they get it together and mature. And sure enough, and you know what? It's tough to go into the big house and win. As a Ohio State fan yourself, I know you're well aware of how hard it is to win at Michigan. And Colorado came out and punched him in the mouth. If not for the quarterback injury you mentioned and a handful of special teams blunders, Colorado probably wins that game, and they're a top 10 team most likely, having, in that scenario, knocked off a top 5 Michigan. So this is a good Colorado team. Vegas still seems to like USC for whatever that's worth, but they're ranked, and if you're looking at the outside, you're kind of wondering, it's Colorado. They're supposed to be bad, right? They haven't been good in a quarter of a century. But all of a sudden, this is a tough team to beat. So it's really exciting. It's really exciting for the Pac-12, I think, to have what was once sort of a bottom feeder. Thank God for Oregon State type of team. Now they're in the lead in the Pac-12 South, and anytime you can make the Pac-12 South even crazier, I think is always going to lead to good things, or at least entertaining things.
It was a tough game for the Trojans in Boulder last year. They had to score a late touchdown to pull out the victory over the Buffs. And even though the Buffs, as you mentioned, the record didn't show the improvement in 2015, they were definitely a tough squad for a lot of Pac-12 teams to deal with. Their head coach, Mike McIntyre, did a nice job at San Jose State, lifted up a struggling program there, was winning double-digit games before he comes to Colorado, and it's taken some time. The recruiting ground isn't necessarily fertile there in Colorado, so you've got to go to California, go to Texas, do all the things that a lot of schools in that portion of the Midwest or Mountain West have to do to get top players, but he has certainly done it. We mentioned Liufau playing well against Michigan. He has not thrown an interception this season. Got hurt against the Wolverines. They bring in the backup, Stephen Montez, and he plays 2 Pac-12 opponents and tears them up pretty well to the tune of 333 yards against Oregon in a surprising win. And then they do what most teams in the Pac-12 do, and now you can group them with everybody else in the Pac-12 that just runs over Oregon State 47-6, and they looked really good in doing so.
He came in for 2 good defenses to get his feet wet, having not prepared probably as the starter during the offseason to come in the big house late against Michigan. That's a struggle. That's tough to say, hey, welcome to college football, kid. But then you come in against Oregon, who is certainly having their troubles on defense, and Oregon State, who are just having troubles. So, it's really good confidence builder against those 2 teams, and he's coming in hot. And this Colorado team, they went into the big house, played well, and then the following week went on the road to Oregon. Now, if you would have told me even 3 weeks ago that Colorado was going to do that and almost walk away 2-0, I would have told you were insane. But here they are, and now they took on Oregon State, nice easy win there. And then they're going back on the road to the LA Coliseum, and they've got to play the Trojans. So they've been in big spots. They don't seem to be afraid. The moment doesn't seem to be too big for them. This is a team that's very talented, and they're competing.
Shea Fields is a kid to look out for the USC defense. He's got 21 passes, 5 for touchdowns, and he makes the most of these catches, 22 per catch. And he has scored all of his touchdowns in the last 3 games against the aforementioned Michigan, Oregon State, where the Buffs have really taken off. Jimmy Gilbert had a big day last week. I just caught a note that Colorado's defense went without allowing a touchdown in a Pac-12 game for the first time ever for the first time in a conference game in 11 years, going back to the Big 12 days against Oklahoma State. And their defensive line coach, Jim Jeffcoat. If you're an old Dallas Cowboys fan, you'll remember that name. He was a force to be reckoned with a long time ago for the Cowboys. He's their defensive line coach for the Buffs. So they're a 6-point underdog despite the record in the ranking against USC. The Trojans broke out against Arizona State. Very impressive, even more so than the 41-20 score. It was like the Sam Darnold, Justin Davis, Juju Smith-Schuster show. Passing, rushing, receiving last week. So maybe we'll see more of the same in the Coliseum.
It's very, very weird to me because USC under Clay Helton are two radically different teams. When they're on the road, they're not very good. They're just, and not just against the Alabamas and the Stanfords of the world. They just play poorly outside of the Coliseum. They're 2-7, I believe, under Helton away from the Coliseum. At the Coliseum, however, they're 5-0 under Helton, and they're outscoring opponents 2-1. I did the math the other night. I think it's 206-102. They're insanely talented at the Coliseum for whatever reason, and I think that's a huge part of the reason. That's what Vegas is looking at. Even though you might look at Colorado and say, "Look, this is a team that's performing better," but USC is just tough to beat. In the Coliseum, and they've learned some tough lessons. I think in September, they've got things turned around. Darnold's rolling. They're finally beating the ball to Justin Davis a lot more. He's been tearing it up. For whatever reason, they were kind of doing this rotation where they bring in several different backs and try to balance the carries. Davis, however, just dominating. A huge reason why they fell apart against Utah is because Davis didn't touch the ball in the fourth quarter. That was not the case against Arizona State. They kept giving them the rock, and so that's a huge part. They've got the offense is rolling. Juju Smith-Schuster is rolling, and just as importantly, other receiving threats are emerging, which is a huge help to the passing game. Because last year it was either one of the running backs got it done or Juju Smith got it done, because that's the only person they really threw to. And now it seems like everybody's coming out of the woodwork. So this is a much, much more complete team. And even though the line is injured and has its struggles, Darnold now has the ability to roll out, move the pocket, buy some time. So this offense, I think, is much, much better than anything we've seen under Helton. And probably Sarkisian, too, while we're at it.
All right, it's USC and Colorado at the Coliseum. The Trojans a 6-point favorite, as Nick alludes to. You got to think that they still have the superior talent across the board. They've played the tougher opponents, although Colorado has stepped it up in recent weeks, and they're at home. So all that adds up to a better USC team, you would think, on paper, but it should be a very interesting game, as was the case last year when the Trojans pulled it out late. So I will have a prediction on this one a little bit later. But Nick, anything else to add to this one?
Well, I think USC has the superior talent, but Colorado has the better coaching. Colorado's very good on the road. USC is very good at home. I would not expect a blowout of sorts that we saw against USC versus Arizona, but either USC is going to win this game, or Colorado is going to have to do something that a lot of other good teams have not been able to accomplish, which is beat Clay Helton and the Trojans in the Coliseum. So one of those two things has to happen. I would guess USC at home. They're playing very well, and I think they've got this one. We're getting pretty close to must-win territory already for USC, so I like the Trojans at home. I don't think it's going to be a heavy blowout. I think this one could be tight.
All right, as Nick says, and it's certainly the case, Colorado has traveled and done very well in the likes of the Big House and at Oregon, splitting those two games and playing very well. Traveling to USC at the Coliseum, a 6-point favorite despite the 2-3 mark. Nick Dempsey from Conquest Chronicles breaking down the Buffs and the Trojans. Thank you, sir.
Anytime, Mark.